Okay, so as you can see there, I've taken a 4-foot level and placed it across the floor widthwise. If you remember, I talked about the floor being out of level front to back, but from side to side, it should be fairly level now that I've done all this floor structure work in here. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom you in so you can see that. It's just about right on, so touch off, but of course the camera being that close up magnifies it even more. But otherwise it looks pretty good. Okay, so I moved back a couple more feet, and I'm going to go ahead and check the level again here. It looks really good. It's just about right on there. So this whole section of plywood is pretty much done, except for cutting out the heat vent right over there. I do have to make one small change over here on this side, right in this corner here. There's probably about 8 inches worth of plywood that's unsupported. The last blocking piece is right here, and this whole corner is unsupported right there. So I'm going to go underneath the floor and just add probably a 2x4 blocking piece in there to keep that up and make sure it's nice and firm. Slipping in the tongue for the next piece of plywood would probably help that, but I don't want to take a chance of having any sort of deflection issue, so I'm just going to go ahead and add another blocking piece underneath the floor. Okay, so what I'm going to talk through now is cutting out the heat vent opening in the floor here. That's what this rectangle is here. I've talked a lot about the way this house was built, and one of the issues with this bathroom was that when they put the original heat vent in, it was crooked, and when you walked in the bathroom, it was very noticeable. It was really an eyesore. So I'm hopefully going to get this right on this time around and make sure that the heat vent is in straight. So at the beginning of the subfloor installation, before I did that, what I did was I put together this diagram to show where all the cutouts need to go on the floor. And as you can see right there, there's a heat vent, and it's 21.5 inches from the front wall, and then 5 7/8 inches from that outer wall. The heat vent itself is 12.25 inches long by roughly 4.25 inches wide. So that gave me my dimensions, and I can go ahead and start drawing on the floor here. So first thing I did was I drew my mark 21.5 inches from this wall here all the way to there. Made a mark, and then I took the framing square and the level, put those next to each other nice and tight, and I drew a straight line this way. Then I moved down 12.25 inches, did the same thing down there, made a mark, and then drew a straight line this way. So that framed the outside edges here of the heat vent opening. From there I measured down 5 7/8 inches to here, did the same thing here, and then I measured from this spot down to here 4.25 inches, same thing there. Took the level and drew a straight line between these marks here and these marks there, and so that's where the heat vent's going to go. And like I said, I'm hoping I got this right and it'll be nice and straight. Okay, so what I'm getting ready to do here is cut this opening out for the heat vent. This opening right here in the floor. And I'm going to be using the VersaCut to do that. So I extended the lines just a little bit, just a few inches past the opening, so I have somewhere to track my cut here and track the laser on the VersaCut. And as you can see on the side there, there's a couple notches, one here and one there. And that marks the outside of the blade. So I know that when I plunge into the floor, that where my limits are in terms of where I can plunge into the floor. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this out and see how it goes. Okay, so I've gone about as far as I want to go with the VersaCut, and what I'll do now is just take the jigsaw and finish off the cuts to the corners here. So far it looks pretty good. Okay, I'm finishing up the cuts with the jigsaw. Okay, so there's a couple spots in the corners that I want to get with the handsaw instead of using the jigsaw, so I don't cut too far here. Okay, so the opening's cut out now. Okay, so I tried to push the heat vent boot up through the floor, but it won't fit, and part of the reason is because I've straightened that opening out, and so it no longer fits, and having to swivel these connections here. I can't swivel it just the right angle so that it goes up in there. So I'm going to have to try a different option here. Okay, so I went out and got all the materials I'm going to need to connect the rigid pipe to the vent boot underneath the floor. I've got a 25-foot section of this flexible duct there. I'm probably only going to need about 2 feet of that, but it only comes in 25-foot sections, so that's what I had to buy. Then I've got a 6-inch pipe connector just in case I need that, some foil tape, and some zip ties. And I could use metal clamps in place of the zip ties, but I opted for the zip ties instead. One other thing I know is that a lot of professionals recommend using some sort of mastic or sealant of some kind, but I'm not going to do that on this project because I'm going to have to do some work underneath the floor later on, and I don't want to make any permanent connections at this point. Okay, so I'm test fitting the boot in the opening there, and it looks really good, nice and snug there. And so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and secure it in place, and then I'll attach the duct underneath the floor after I get it secured. Okay, so I finally got the boot in, and how I did that is I nailed a roofing nail here, using the palm nailer, and then for the nails on the sides, I used the side of the hammer and just tapped it in that way, in this way, and that worked pretty well. I'm not sure how pros do it. I think they might nail at an angle, but I'm not sure. But tapping with the side of the head seemed to work just fine. Okay, so I've got the flexible duct installed, and I had to cut the rigid pipe back about 2 feet so I'd have less of a bend here. So that looks pretty good. I used some foil tape on this end to attach the pipe connector. I'm probably going to also add some sheet metal screws there, 3 on this end. I did the same thing over here, added a pipe connector there, and I'm going to probably add 3 screws over here also. The duct itself is attached to each one of those pipe connectors with zip ties, and then on the outside here I have another set of zip ties here and here to secure the insulation to the pipe. So that's all finished, and I'm going to move on to the next step.